actor's vow. I will take my rightful place on stage, and I will be myself. I am not a cosmic orphan. I have no reason to be timid. I will respond as I feel, awkwardly, vulgarly, but respond. I will have my throat open. I will have my heart open. I will be vulnerable. I may have anything or everything the world has to offer, but the thing I need most and want most is to be myself. I will admit rejection, admit pain, admit frustration, admit even pettiness, admit shame, admit outrage, admit anything and everything that happens to me. The best and most human parts of me are those I have inhabited and hidden from the world. I will work on it. I will raise my voice. I will be heard. This is a poem by Elia Kazan. This is the poem that gave the name to the podcast you're listening to right now. Today I want to talk about why this podcast is named this way, a little bit more about my story, and what is my own vow as an actor. Before we get to that, I do want to introduce the Sunday Spotlight of the week. This week's Sunday Spotlight is Roswell Franklin, and I might not be completely objective with this one because Roswell and I went to the same school. He was a sophomore when I was a freshman and so on. He was always 1 year ahead of me. And he is such a talented actor. Unfortunately, we never had the honor to work together on stage when we were in school. But he is an actor right now in New York City, a professional actor. He's done a bunch of stuff. He's also a poet. He plays piano. He's a musician. He writes songs. And he is an overall amazing human being and actor. And I wanted to bring him in this Sunday with an amazing interview in which he will talk about his perspective as a Black actor, artist in America right now, and his art in general. I can't wait for you guys to hear it. I am so excited to show you Roswell's interview and share his story. If you want to find him before Sunday, he has an Instagram. His handle is @RozHereForYou. That is ROZHERE 4 U. Okay, so this week's episode is very special for me. It's a very important episode, obviously. I think that until now the podcast has been, talking about Shakespeare and self-taping and almost like mini classes about acting, which is something that I do want to have here, but I don't want this to only be that because the podcast is called The Actor's Vow, and I just read to you the poem that inspired this title. And I live by this piece. I usually write my podcast, not that I write it, but I have an outline, I'm like, I'm going to talk about this. I'm a very organized person, and I have always been such a perfectionist, which is something that I'm going to talk about, and not in a good way. So I wanted to challenge myself, and not just challenge. This episode is all about being vulnerable, being raw, and just being yourself. And this is what I wanted to do with it. This is the 6th episode of the podcast, and I've already gotten people asking why the podcast is named this way, and many people interested in who I am personally. I think that I talk about it a lot in my personal Instagram page that, by the way, if you don't follow, is @Denise Borraz Trepat. But probably if you just listen to this podcast, you're like, who is this person, right? And the truth is that I'm just an actor like you. I'm literally sitting in my studio, in my own home, here alone, talking into a mic and trying to figure out where this is going. And I'm not just talking about the podcast, like generally, like my career as an actor and my life. Nobody has everything figured out, trust me. So we're in this together. And that's one of the reasons why I created this podcast, because I feel like art and acting and the performing arts are all about community. And I always wish there was this space in which we can all get together, like more experienced actors, less experienced actors, it doesn't matter. A place where we all can support each other, be together, and people who really love the craft of acting, not people who are in it for the wrong reasons. And I never want to be excluding, of course, but this is a podcast, this is a community for those actors who are invested heart and soul into acting. So that is basically me. That's what I want to do. That's what I've been my whole life. I was born in Spain and I was raised there. I grew up there. I started doing theater when I was 8 years old. And I always ask this question to everybody I interview, and that's a question that I always love to ask because I love hearing all your stories about why you got into acting. Everybody has such a different story, but the most beautiful thing about it is that they all have one thing in common. And you'll start noticing that a common factor that we all have in why we do what we do, right? But I got into acting when I was 8. I was so shy. I was such a loner, if you want to call it like that. I'm an only child. I grew up, I don't want to say no friends, but kind of no friends. I had like a couple best friends. You can count them with like one hand. And I was the kind of person who would just rather read a book and stay silent. I grew up playing with my dolls and with cars and playing all the time on my own. Like, I was an only child, so I would just be playing for hours and hours and hours and making up stories and dressing up. And I just remember it being so much fun, the pure joy of imagination, the pure joy of knowing that I could be anyone whenever I wanted. But then in real life, I was so quiet all the time, and I feel like that's something that I have always been. I think I'm kind of an introvert, right? But then when I was 8, there was this amateur company in my city where I grew up in Spain, and they needed a child actor. And I still don't know exactly why I was the one chosen, but I was. And I remember that moment in which, I had been to several rehearsals. But then there was this moment of the first performance, and my heart was beating so fast. I was hearing the lines. I was hearing the lines that meant that 2 lines after that, I would have to be on stage. I was hearing the lines that meant that my cue was coming. And I had never had that feeling. My heart was beating so fast. I was so nervous. My palms were sweating, but at the same time, it was so empowering. I thought the world was going to crumble under my feet, and at the same time, I felt like I could rule the whole world. And I think you know what I'm talking about. And then the cue came in, and I still don't know how, but I got on that stage, and I remember that moment. My foot touched that stage, and I felt that spotlight on me, and that was it. I had never felt anything like that. I felt like at that moment, I could do anything. I had always felt like someone who wasn't special or someone who didn't have anything really different about themselves. I felt someone that was really shy and lonely. But that moment gave me all the power I needed. And that was the moment that I decided that I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. It only took that small production of, actually it was a Christmas play, that showed me what I was meant to be doing for the rest of my life. And since that day, I haven't left the stage a single time. This actually has been the first time since I was 8 years old that I have not touched a stage in 2 years. And the only reason is because I moved to LA from New York City, and in LA there aren't that many theaters, and I'm transitioning to more film and TV for now. But this is it. When you know, you know. That is what theater brought to me at that moment. And yes, at that moment, theater was a personal outlet. It became something that allowed me to speak up when I didn't have the words. It was something that allowed me to show myself, because, when you play a character, it's always parts of you that are being exposed. It was theater was a mean for me to channel my power, to discover myself, to discover others, to empathize, to connect with others. And now it has evolved into something very different. Of course, I'm not that little girl anymore that was shy and scared, although, there still remains of that. I'm still totally an introvert. And now it obviously has evolved into something bigger, that if that helped me in that moment, how that can help others. And I've seen the power of theater help others, and I've seen how impactful it can be in communities, in people, in connecting human beings in so many amazing ways, and healing. Like, theater is such a beautiful healing tool for you, for those around you. It's such a pure way of being and experiencing humanity. Anyways, I think I'm digressing. I don't have a scheme of how this episode is gonna go, and I'm just talking here, but what I'm trying to get to is the poem that I read at the beginning. This poem, I found it maybe 4 years ago, while I was still in college studying acting. And this has become my daily, if you want to call it, prayer. I used to be someone with a lot of anxiety. I used to be someone with a lot of fears, and someone who would hide all that behind a mask. I am still working on that. In the past years, I've realized that this is something that is very important for me as an actor, because you can't be an actor or something on stage that you are not in real life. You cannot be vulnerable on stage if you are not in real life. It just doesn't happen like that. And because it had worked for me for many years, doesn't mean I was doing it to my full potential. I think that because in my life, like growing up, I'm told you, as a child, as a teenager, I was really shy, and I used that theater as a way to be something that I wasn't in real life. But those characters were still lacking something, and I think it was that raw, vulnerable part of it. And when I found this poem, I just resonated so much with it, because I was in this healing journey, if you want to call it. And now that these past 2 years that I've been able to dedicate more to myself, because I'm out of school and I'm out of, I'm fully dedicated to my profession right now. This has been a journey of healing myself for my career. And this has been a journey of bettering myself for my career, because as an actor, you are your own instrument, you are your own tool. And the way you are, the way you experience emotions, the way you experience life has a lot to do with how you will be as an actor. So I found this poem. Let's get back to it. I keep talking about other things, I'm sorry. I found this poem, and I've gotten into meditation lately. And what I do every morning is I meditate, and I have this poem on the wall, and I read it out loud. And then I have a set of 5 affirmations that I will share another day that are very powerful to me. You might think, how long have you been doing this? Yes, I've read this probably now for like a year and a half, every single day, sometimes twice a day. And every single day I find a new meaning to it. And I find a new way in which it touches my soul, so to speak. This is a poem about the importance of you being you. There is this thing, my professor, director, and mentor in school, her name was Maggie Lally, one of my favorite people I've ever worked with. And she said this thing that has always stayed with me. And it was, the hardest thing you'll ever have to do is just be. And when she said it, it resonated to me as in acting. It resonated to me as, on stage, it's hard to just be. But as I've, experienced more life as an adult, this adulting thing, this professional world thing, I found this to be so true in real life. And yes, real life translates to acting, and acting translates to real life, because in the end, acting tries to emulate real life. I find that we live in a society where it's so hard for people to just be. It's really funny because I just actually, I'm recording this at 8:30 p.m. in Los Angeles. This is weird. I always record in the morning and like have a fresh day and I dedicate the whole day to the podcast. But I've had such 2 busy days and a busy weekend and a busy week. It's been crazy. So the point is, I've been recording this and I just finished listening to a live by Chandres Bardois. He is a very dear friend of mine and he's a spiritual guru and someone that I would really love to bring to this podcast at some point. But the live he was doing was about mental health. And he was saying how we live in a society in which discussing mental health is a taboo. And, I see it as that, as mental health, but not just as that, like you can't share, oh, I have anxiety or my fears. It doesn't just translate to mental health. I thought it was such a true statement in which I think we live in a society in which emotions are taboo. Like if I share that I am scared or nervous or I am going through a bad time, I'm just not enough. Or like not enough to now be talking to you guys. Like if I'm struggling as an artist, I'm not enough to talk to you guys. And that's just so wrong. I wish we lived in a place in which we could all be so raw, because guess what? We are all struggling with something. We are all having fears. We all have ambition. We all have things that we share in common. And if you shared them, you would realize how true that is. I used to be someone who went through life on my own. I used to be someone who was like, yes, if I don't share that, people won't know about me and they won't know my weaknesses. And that's it, because I probably am the only one who's living through this. And guess what? When I started sharing things with people, I discovered that even if we are not experiencing exactly the same thing, we are experiencing similar things. And this is what I mentioned in one of my episodes, that universality lies in specificity. If you can be raw, if you can share your emotions, if you can be vulnerable, if you can have your heart open, your throat open, if you can just be yourself, these emotions, this soul that you are sharing will touch people. They will connect with people, even if they're not what they're going through exactly, but it will be relatable to them, because we are humans, and as humans we have emotions that are real for everybody. And we live in a society in which it seems like it's wrong, like it's weak to be vulnerable. And that is something that I think we have to unlearn. Like we've been taught that it's wrong to be vulnerable, that it's weak, that you are weak if you are sad, that you are weak if you are scared, if you have fears, if you have anxiety, that you are weak if you even have positive emotions. Like, have you ever been super excited? Have you ever been so passionate about someone and someone just looked at you like you're weird and told you to like calm down or try to shut you down? Like, why is it wrong to be emotional? Why is it wrong to be extra? Like, that's what makes us human: emotions, to be passionate, to live life at its fullest. Why is that wrong? This is such an important lesson to learn as an actor, or actually to unlearn. This is such an important thing that if you want to be an actor, you have to work on actively. And I don't think you ever get to a point where it's completely done. You know, I think it's a journey that for me personally, it's taken me many years and I'm still not there. I still sometimes catch myself, when they ask me, how are you? Oh, great, I'm great. My day is going great. Thank you. Or posting on social media, oh, my cookies that I baked today, they're so amazing, which they are. But maybe I'm having a horrible day. Maybe my day is not that great. Maybe, we live in a life that social media and influencers show us that their life is so perfect, but nobody's life is perfect. And then we look at it and we're like, oh, why aren't we like that? And then we go outside and we pretend that we are happy too, and that everything is great, and that nothing is too much. You're not too happy, but also not too sad, because we worry so much about what others will think of us. And to be honest, living in LA, this has been one of the biggest lessons. I always say that I miss New York so much, and I know that I will be back in New York, and I cannot wait to be back in New York. But I feel like life brought me to LA to teach me many lessons. LA is definitely a city that changes you. And this has been one of them. I have had to do so much work on personal strength and courage and just finding myself in order to be able to be who I want to be in this city. LA is a city in which what I'm talking about, in which what the Actor's Vow poem talks about, is non-existent. LA is a city in which people are more interested on the outside than the inside, in which people are ready to put on a mask to seem something that they are not, in which people usually will try to get something out of you. And I'm talking generally, of course, not everybody's like that, but LA is a very superficial city in general. And there's so many actors, I see it every day, that are trying to get to a place from a place of loving their craft, but they get lost in other things. And it's so easy to get lost in other things in this industry. I mean, I think especially in the film and TV industry, but also in the theater industry, getting lost into what will other people think of me? What do I want other people to see me like? What do I want to do in this audition so the auditioners will like me? What does the producer of this film I want to be in want? And then you end up becoming this mix of things of what you think other people want you to be. Not even what other people want you to be, because guess what? You don't know what they want you to be. And actually, most people, they don't want you to be anything. They just want to find something that works for them and for their job. But you end up creating these images, these ideas in your head of what you think is what is wanted from you. And that ends up being not the real you. And as an actor, you cannot allow that. I mean, you can get lost in all this social media influencer thing. You can get lost in these parties. And it's so easy because you think, oh, if I do that, I will meet other people. And if I am cool, I will meet people that will get me somewhere. Or if I go to this party and I hang out with these people, maybe they will want me to work with them. But guess what? If you're not being your true self in those situations, you end up attracting people that you actually don't want to work with them. Like, instead of asking yourself, do they want to work with me? Ask yourself, do I want to work with them? This has been such a struggle for me personally. For example, I was once invited to a party. I cannot say names, but it was a party of a big artist in the music industry. It was in a big mansion. There was a lot of famous people there. And I got there. I got invited because I knew someone personally that organized that party, and I got invited in. And I got there, and it was all full of influencers and /actresses /models, and they were all wearing literally lingerie. Like, I'm not exaggerating. It wasn't like a showing dress or something like that. No, they were literally wearing lingerie. And when I'm saying everybody, I'm saying like 80% of the women there. The ambiance there was so wrong. I mean, there was, of course, all kinds of drugs and alcohol, and you know, the person whose mansion it was upstairs. That artist didn't even come down, and you know, he had people, especially women, being sent to his private room all the time. And it was a very interesting party. There was hundreds and hundreds of people, and I was just sitting there, and you know, you struggle with yourself. Because I went there and I'm not like that. I was just sitting there and I was basically I use that time to observe, but sometimes you might find yourself, like I found myself telling myself, look, these people are so good looking, or, oh, these women are better than me. You start comparing yourself. And I started thinking to myself, well, I didn't come in lingerie. Like, maybe I look like an idiot, or maybe why don't I like this party lifestyle and everything these people are doing here? And I definitely felt out of place. And then, this party ended up being raided by the police with helicopters, by the way. When I left that party, I was there for like an hour and a half, okay? Like, don't get me wrong. I didn't stay there for too long. I'm bringing this up because at that moment, it was the moment that I realized, what am I doing? Like, why did I come to that party? I thought I would go to that party and network and meet people, and because there were going to be famous people. But I'm like, do I want to network with these people? Like, do I want to work with these people? Are these people real? Like, everybody was putting on a mask and trying to be something they were not. And that's not why I got into acting. And I feel like in situations like this, you can find yourself like that all the time. I mean, again, more in film and TV, but in theater too, you can find yourself in situations in which people are just trying to be something that they're not, and people are just trying to connect by thinking that by looking a certain way or behaving a certain way, they'll be better. But the truth is, as an actor, just know really well what you want. And honestly, as an actor, what you need to want the most is to just be you. And anything that brings you away from that, just throw it to the trash. Like, you don't need it in your life. Anything in your life that doesn't allow you to be you, get away from it. It doesn't matter what or who it is. You have to be able to be yourself. You have to be able to admit things. You have to be able, like it says the poem, to admit rejection, pain, frustration, shame, outrage, anything that makes you you, anything that is emotions, anything that you're feeling. You have to speak up. And by speak up, I mean speak up about who you are. You have to make yourself hurt. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be raw. You have to be you so others can find themselves in you and in your art, and others can be able to do that because the world needs that. The world doesn't need more people trying to be something they are not. The world doesn't need more perfect looking people, because guess what? Nobody's perfect. All these people who look like they are perfect, they just look like it. And trust me, I've been there. Like, growing up, I was the person who tried to look perfect. That's why I didn't talk. I just got the best grades. I always put a smile on and just be perfect. And just that doesn't work. Like, that doesn't work for anybody. Perfection doesn't exist. Perfection is an illusion. Perfection is not art, and this is not why we're here. We are here to tell the truth. We are here to shed light into the dark, to show the dark parts of the soul. We are here to just be. And if there's one thing that you have to do as an actor, is just be. If there's one thing you will worry about being as an actor, just worry about just being yourself. And I promise that will be more than enough. The hardest thing you'll ever have to do is to just be. I hope this all made sense, and I hope this explains why the name of the podcast, because this is what I stand for as an artist. I hope this explained what my vow as an actor is. My vow is to always strive for that vulnerability. And I cannot promise you, and I cannot promise myself that it will be there 100%, but I can promise I will always work on it, and that is my goal as a human and as an actor. So before the end of the episode, I wanted to bring the play of the week. And this week, since it's Pride Month, I wanted to bring The Normal Heart by Larry Kramer. Now, I think a lot of you might have already read it, so it's nothing new. But if you haven't, please go read it. I mean, Larry Kramer recently passed away, and I just thought I had to talk about this play because it's just holds such a special place in my heart. It's a play that was written in 1985, and it's a play that I actually directed in Spain. I directed this play 4 years ago, I don't remember, but it's the second play I've ever directed, and it was such a beautiful experience. The stories that were put into this play are worth telling, are worth reading, are worth acting, are worth everything. And I mean, technically speaking, you can find amazing monologues for male, amazing scenes for both male and female, but especially for males. And I mean, if you're an actor, you need to read The Normal Heart. It's such a beautiful story about the AIDS pandemic and the crazy injustice that happened in those times and how the government dealt with it. And you read it, but I think it's a piece of history that needs to be talked about and a piece of history that all artists should know about. So this will be all for this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. This was a very personal one for me, sharing things that I have never shared before in public or even in private. You know, working on that vulnerability, and I just wanted to share with you guys a little bit of my story and a little bit of what I stand for, what this podcast stands for, in the hopes that I can get to know that about you. I really love to hear about you. I love interacting with you through Instagram. I just love the comments I'm getting and the messages I'm getting from you. So I'm always available to talk and available to collaborate. And I really want this to be a community in which artists can really rely on, in which we can learn together, in which we can create something beautiful together and support each other through everything. So if you enjoyed this podcast, it would be so helpful if you could subscribe on iTunes and give a review and a 5-star review. Some of them are amazing, so thank you so much for supporting the podcast. And if you don't already do, follow The Actor's Vow on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And thank you so much again for joining me another week in this podcast. You guys make this possible. Thank you, and see you next Wednesday.